for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson, and I'm your co-host.
My name is Jack Prince, your fellow co-host.
We've got quite a bit to talk about today, including some breaking news that we received earlier this morning as we record on Friday, May 24th, 2019. But before we get to our items today, a couple of reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. We would appreciate any help that you can give us. It costs us money to put our episodes up on Spreaker. You can find archived episodes at Spreaker.com. Do a search for Southpaws. We're on the iTunes store as well. Search under podcast for Southpaws, look for our logo, and you'll find us real easy. And we want to say good morning or good day to all of our affiliates across Pacifica Radio, and of course the good folks at Global Community Radio Channel 1, where we are on every Monday night at 9 p.m. right after Democracy Now! And I just realized, looking at their schedule, you know who comes on before Democracy Now?
Who's that?
Ian Masters, Background Briefing.
Fantastic.
So we've got two great shows as a lead-in for us. Again, that's Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific across Global Community Radio Channel 1. And we've got breaking news as we came in this morning. Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, has announced that she is resigning. I have this. This is from The Guardian. Theresa May has bowed to intense pressure from her own party and named June 7th as the day she will step aside as Conservative leader, drawing her turbulent 3-year premiership to a close. Speaking in front of 10 Downing Street, May said, "It has been an honor of my life to serve as Britain's second female prime minister." With her voice breaking, she said she would leave with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love. And that's a direct quote. The Prime Minister listed a series of what she said were her government's achievements, including tackling the deficit, reducing unemployment, and boosting funding for mental health. But she admitted this, quote, "It is and will always remain a matter of deep regret to me that I have not been able to deliver Brexit," end of quote.
Yeah, hey, good riddance. You know what? What is taking place there makes us dream about seeing the equivalent here.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if it doesn't happen here, we aren't going to have a democracy to worry about, Darren. We don't have to go back too far in history to realize, and I'm trying to find a quote, that once you lose the operative democracy in a country, it never comes back.
I want to read Lord Acton. We're going to be reading a lot of Lord Acton quotes today, and I want to start out with probably his most famous one. "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. Still more when you superadd the tendency of the certainty of corruption by authority."
You know, we live in a country that the history books talk about the escape of authoritarianism on the continent of Europe, and we have such beautiful quotes as Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "America was opened after the feudal mischief was spent. We began well. No inquisitions here, no kings, no nobles, but a la Donald J. Trump." You know, many Americans, Darren, have the impressional sense that Mussolini and Hitler came to power through violence. But each came to power legally in a working democracy.
Yes.
Each made use of the parliamentary system to subvert and reorder the rule of law. You're going to hear us say rule of law quite a bit, because the rule of law today in Trump's America means the only laws that rule are those that favor him and his agenda.
Exactly.
That to him is rule of law. And then back to the historical account, Mussolini and Hitler both quickly legally aggregated state power overwhelmingly in his own person. Do you hear that? What had been state power was personified. And we're seeing that now. If Trump says it, it's so. I saw a bumper sticker that the word has become flesh. We're not talking critical. No, the word has become flesh.
Yeah.
That authority is given to God, and now it's been granted to Trump in the fundamentalist mind. Mm-hmm. Both Hitler and Mussolini were supported by sophisticated intellectuals. I'm saying that because they're not just the toothless Confederate flag guy going down Division Street. Mm-hmm. Both of those leaders, and we see it today, supported by intellectuals and political theorists who made the case to the people that democratic processes weaken the nation in a time of crisis. Mm-hmm. The despot dictator comes in, and again, let's break the amnesia here in America and remember the Patriot Act that even took away the Miranda rights, or tried to, was ushered in under the guise of a national crisis. You have a crisis, and the dictator alone can fix it. How many times did we on this show quote Trump saying he and he alone, the stable genius, by the way, could fix the ills that are facing America? While Hillary's running around saying everything's hunky-dory, Trump is saying everything's a crisis. It's a crisis. You know, you heard it, the crisis. And here you have a political expert writing that democracies are weakened when the maintenance is that the nation is in a time of crisis.
And what book are you reading that from,
I'm
Jack?
reading the excellent book called The End of America, A Citizen's Call to Action. If you want to put a title on today's show, this is a call to action.
Naomi Wolf is the author.
The author is, exactly.
Yeah.
All dictators invoke a threat. Then they develop a parliamentary force. They create secret prisons. See if this sounds familiar. They surveil ordinary citizens. They arbitrarily detain citizens and aliens. They harass citizens groups. They target writers. Mm-hmm. They target entertainers. They use slurs and smear anybody who contradicts their point of view. Other key individuals are attacked for dissenting. This reads like a formula. This was, by the way, written a number of years ago. They intimidate the press. They recast dissent as treason. How prescient is this? And they criticize those who question as partaking in espionage, as we now see Assange being, if I'm not mistaken, tried underneath the bill for and labeled it an espionage.
Yeah, I've got that story. This is from Natasha Bertrand at Politico.com. This is dated May 23rd. The Justice Department has hit WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange with Espionage Act charges, escalating a legal fight against the high-profile activist and alarming press freedom activists. The Department of Justice had previously only indicted Assange on a single count of conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. Thursday's revelation of the additional 18 charges filed in the Eastern District of Virginia means Assange could face significantly more prison time if found guilty. The alleged Espionage Act violations relate to Assange's complicity with Chelsea Manning, a former U.S. Army soldier who was convicted in July 2013 of violating the Espionage Act after she shuttled troves of classified government information to WikiLeaks. Officials said Assange solicited the information from and then brazenly published details that put the government's human sources at risk, disregarding explicit warnings from the government.
Here you have a whistleblower. You have a hero.
That's a whistleblower. That's not espionage. That's whistleblowing.
Exactly. And look at the fascist labeling that they have. Another one that they use extensively is sedition. You question the president. You question these procedures, and the Sedition Act comes out. You got the Espionage Act. You know, Darren, it's very, very difficult to keep an open society. History will show that. But it's extremely simple to close one down. We're asleep. We're asleep at the wheel. Democracy takes great energies and continuous fighting. We want to let somebody else do it for us. We're going to ask a congressman to make sure democracy stays alive while they're in bed with the corporations. That's our idea of patriotism. That's our idea of keeping awake. Are you kidding me?
I want to read this. This is a statement that was issued by Bruce Brown, Executive Director of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. Quote, any government use of the Espionage Act to criminalize the receipt and publication of classified information poses a dire threat to journalists seeking to publish such information in the public interest, irrespective of the Justice Department's assertion that Assange is not a journalist. End of quote. Well, if Assange isn't a journalist, explain all the awards he's won. Journalism awards. We've listed them on this show previously. Go back in the archives.
Just read that the mark of a dictatorship, a fascist dictatorship, is you attack individuals within the media. And what a better poster child than to go after Assange. You know, Darren, we think of American democracy as being somehow ever renewable, capable of withstanding all assaults, right? But the founders didn't think that. They thought in the contrast that it was tyranny that was eternal. The history of America, ladies and gentlemen, is tyranny. The founders knew that. You don't just write democracy down on the coin and say it's going to operate. They knew that it was fragile. Let me read this to you again. The founders, in contrast, thought that the history of the world was marked by tyranny, that tyranny was eternal, ever renewable, and capable of withstanding all assaults, whereas democracy is difficult, personally exacting, and vanishingly fragile. The founders did not see Americans as being special in any way. They saw America as a possibility of a process of liberty. They threw the possibility out there with the branches, the three branches of accountability and the branches of power. They knew that the tendency in the history of the world was power, as we've talked about absolute power, coming in, controlling, eliminating an open society, taking personal charge. We have had a history of monarchs. We have had a history of despots. We have had a history of kings. We have had a history of religious persecution. Hell, we had a whole age called the Dark Age, for crying out loud. What has our history been? Our history has been a moment when they said, let's try something else. Let's have an open society. And these power brokers like Trump and his ancestors, they're adept at coming in and perverting those laws, closing down an open society, closing down branches of accountability, hushing mouths of dissent, criminalizing those who protest, attacking the media, which is essential to keep a democracy alive and well.
Politico talked to Matt Mueller, who was a Department of Justice spokesperson during the Obama administration. Now, the Obama administration talked about filing Espionage Act charges against Assange, but they decided against it. Matt Mueller explains why to Politico. Quote, we didn't bring this case for a couple of reasons. First, we thought it was a dangerous precedent to prosecute Assange for something that reporters do all the time. We didn't believe Assange was a journalist, but the Espionage Act doesn't make any distinction between journalists and others. So if you can apply it to Assange, there's no real reason you couldn't apply it to the New York Times. Second, and it's related, it's not at all clear that charging someone with the publication of classified information could survive court scrutiny. End of quote. So right there it is. Right there's why they didn't do it. But now Trump's going to try it?
You know, it's a attack, a personal attack, and has ramifications with the media. But, you know, I want to look at now just what we've seen in the last week as far as absolute perversion of law and the refusal of Trump obeying the law, whether it's subpoenas to pull them into the into the Congress. It goes on and on. A complete refusal to hand over his tax returns. But more importantly, it has, in my opinion, been a long process. The perversion and the reduction of democracy. Let me give you an example. In 2002, the Bush administration created and named the Department of Homeland Security. They named the Department of Homeland Security, okay? White House spokespeople started to refer to the United States unprecedentedly as the homeland. Now, that seems innocuous, doesn't it?